The Ag Tribes Report is brought to you by Legacy Interviews, a video service that captures people as they really are, so the future knows who they really were. Here are Legacy Interviews guests Mark and Stephanie Mendenhall on the unexpected ease of their experience.
What'd you guys think? How was it?
Much easier than I expected.
Yep.
Much easier. You've made us feel very comfortable.
Was this something that weighed on you for a while?
Did her.
We looked at it and said, well, we'll just wing it. Because, you give this list of figure this out and figure this out. Oh, well, we didn't get that done.
What we remember, and what we forgot, we'll tell the kids later. Tomorrow I'll say, God, why didn't I tell this story?
Yeah,
or why didn't I tell them
this?
about this? You do a good job of asking questions.
Welcome to the Ag Tribes Report, a breakdown of the top stories affecting the culture of agriculture, with your host, Vance Crowe. The report begins in 3, 2, 1. Let's begin.
Welcome to the Ag Tribes Report. I'm your host, Vance Crowe. Each week, I bring on a new co-host that represents one of the many ag tribes throughout U.S. and Canadian agriculture. This week, I have my friend and fellow board member, Glen Cope, who is a fourth-generation cow-calf operator in southwest Missouri, otherwise known as the Ozarks. Glen is not only on FCS Financial, but he is also on the board of MFA Oil, and I have gotten to know Glen and highly respect him, and I'm really excited that he decided to come on. So welcome to the show, Glen.
Vance, great to be on. Thanks for having me.
So what have you been paying attention to lately?
Well, lots going on, I think, in the ag world, particularly with the new administration. I think Trump's done a lot of things, particularly in the tariff realm, that has got some farmers concerned. And, some people have a lot of concerns with the tariff. But, we've had this huge trade deficit with all these countries that we've propped up forever. And we've got to balance that somehow. And Trump's solution to that is to do these tariffs. And, it seems like agriculture more than any other industry suffered as a result. But farmers are pretty patriotic people, and we've kind of took it on the chin with that. But also, Vance, there's been a lot of production in the row crop sector of the business. It seems like farmers can't stand prosperity. So 2 or 3, 4 years ago, when corn was $7, we high prices cure high prices, and the droughts that we've had the last few years have not seemed to really diminish yields overall. Technology, genetics, just farmers' resiliency, it seems like, has just kind of played into that. And so, it seems like, when I was a kid, I remember Bill Clinton in one of his State of the Union speeches talked about how we needed to buy more of our things from China, because if we supported China and propped up their economy, they would move away from communism. Well, that hasn't happened. And it seems like China more than ever is more of our adversary. What they're doing with their military, what they're doing in the South China Sea. It's caused a lot of concern, and Trump's wanting more stuff produced here in the U.S. And his answer has been tariffs, and I don't know if that's, I don't have the silver bullet, but it seems like he's trying to move the needle in that direction, and obviously that's been a concern for pricing.
Well, we have got a lot to talk about, in particular around tariffs and President Trump. So tonight, what we're going to dive into is President Trump directing tariff revenues to support farmers hit by trade disputes. We're also going to talk about the U.S. bailout of Argentina, leading to cheap soybean exports and undercutting American producers. We're also going to talk about the New World screwworm, which is getting a lot closer to the U.S. border. And finally, we're going to talk about the government shutdown disruptions to things like USDA services. We're also going to talk about the Bitcoin land price report. We're going to hear Glen's take on the Peter Thiel paradox, and we'll also hear about his worthy adversary. And we're going to try and do that in just 30 minutes. But before we get started, I did want to have a moment to recognize the work of Ryan Whitehouse. Ryan was a member of the Illinois Farm Bureau. I knew Ryan for more than 10 years, and it was a shock to me late last week when I found out that he had passed away. Ryan was a member of the Farm Bureau community in Illinois, and he was one of those people that if you met him, even if you didn't know anything at all about agriculture, you were welcomed in. He wanted to hear what you had to say. He had all sorts of great counterpoints and wanted to discuss. And I am devastated by the loss of Ryan. I know his family is from Normal, Illinois, which is just outside of where I grew up, and I wanted to mention him and honor his memory. So let's get started with story number one. Donald Trump directs tariff revenues to bail out soybean farmers amid the trade war. On October 1st, President Trump announced that he would use revenue from tariffs to provide substantial support for American farmers, particularly soybean producers affected by China's reduced purchases. In a Truth Social post, Trump blamed China for using U.S. farmers as pawns in the trade negotiating, noting China's failure to meet soybean import commitments. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent confirmed aid announcements soon, emphasizing Trump's backing for farmers who supported him. This comes as U.S. soybean exports to China have halved in early 2025, with farmers facing low prices around $10.50 a bushel and storage issues. So this became a hot issue on X when I came out and said, hey, I'm not so sure that tariff payments are going to help farmers as much as they think it is. It's going to make prices go up. But what do you think, Glenn? Should Donald Trump be offering some of these tariffs to soybean farmers to compensate for the loss they've had in this trade war?
Well, farmers have taken kind of on the nose from the tariffs, obviously, and he's talked about all the revenues that the U.S. has had as a result of the tariffs. And I think China has kind of had some give and take with us, trying to even the playing field by what just a couple of years ago we were sending 10 to 15% of our soybeans here in the U.S. to China, and now it's zero essentially. So, yeah, absolutely, these tariff revenues need to be going to farmers. It won't make them whole, but maybe it'll help them kind of keep the lenders at bay in the short term, because this is a challenge. You see a lot of these farmers, particularly in eastern Arkansas, that are just really struggling to keep the farm afloat. And obviously, we've had an overproduction the last few years. We've got oversupply, but certainly the tariffs have played into that. So, yeah, we've got to send this tariff money to these farmers.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely feel for farmers who, like, if you get 10, 15% of your market just cut right out from underneath you, and the Chinese, it appears, are trying to use the fact that so much farmer support is under Donald Trump. If you just stop buying soybeans, you can maybe crack the back there. So it makes sense to me that Trump wants to do this. But man, oh man, pumping more money into the farm economy, whether it's through tariffs or through the printing of money, seems like it's going to continue to do the things that farmers are suffering under right now, which is high input prices, the price of everything, tractors, fertilizer, labor, everything is going up. Seems like this will only exacerbate that.
Absolutely. If there is a little bit of consolation prize, finally the Senate has confirmed a fellow Missourian, Richard Fordyce, as USDA Undersecretary for Farm Production and Conservation. Richard's a good friend of mine, and he lives it every day. He's a corn and soybean producer, and he raises cattle like myself, and so he gets it. But now that the government shut down, getting those payments out is going to be a challenge. But President Trump chose a good one when he put that guy in charge of Undersecretary for Farm Production and Conservation. Richard did a good job, and he knows what farmers are going through, and I hope there's some light at the end of the tunnel. Yeah,
I personally like that Richard Fordyce is from Missouri. I've met Richard, but I like it because Missouri is such a diverse state, right? You have the 1/3 is row crops, 1/3 is mostly cattle, but also poultry, the livestock, and then a full third is ag businesses. And so somebody coming from that background is going to have a big, wide open picture of what the agriculture system is really like and what do you need to do in order to keep farmers going.
Absolutely. Vance, I'm strictly in the cattle business, so a lot of this I don't understand in terms of government payments for those guys. But, farmers don't want to farm for for government check. They want to produce according to the market, and we've come up against a lot of challenges of late. And in the cattle business, we've had it pretty good, especially the last 6 months. And in fact, it's probably as good as it's ever been. And we can't believe what these feeder cattle prices have been. But my heart goes out to these row crop guys that are really struggling right now.
You can tell just by the way conversations are happening on X that people are more stressed than they've ever been. It's definitely something I hope clears up, but I don't know how quick that'll happen. All right, moving on to story number 2. $20 billion bailout to Argentina sparks soybean export surge and undercutting American farmers. In late September, the U.S. approved a $20 billion bailout package for Argentina amid its economic crisis, including a currency swap line from the Federal Reserve. Shortly after, on September 26th, Argentina suspended its 26% export tax on soybeans, enabling a cheap sale to China. Over 1 million tons booked immediately, with 10 plus cargoes shipped. This has fueled tensions as leaked texts from Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent reveal White House frustration over Argentina's move, which undercuts U.S. farmers already strained by trade wars and low prices. Democratic senators like Amy Klobuchar and Elizabeth Warren have called for halting aid, arguing that it harms American producers who lost market share to Brazil and now Argentina. U.S. soybean exports to China dropped 29% in 2025, just like we were talking about. And basically everybody's saying it. Instead of talking about these numbers, China, since the tariff war, has not bought a single soybean. And now the very people that we're going to help out, they just shipped 10 cargoes to China. What do you think of this, Glenn?
Well, it seems like the U.S., every time we try to help somebody, they turn around and stab us in the back. I remember South Korea several years ago wouldn't take any U.S. beef because of mad cow or any little excuse. They refused to take U.S. beef. And I got to thinking, we've got American troops over there in South Korea protecting them from the North Koreans. Because if we weren't there, the North Koreans would come across the border and take over South Korea. And here we are again, helping out a country that is sort of stabbing us in the back and shipping all these beans to China that we ought to be shipping from U.S. here ourselves. And so it's frustrating. It seems like this is just kind of par for the course, though.
Yeah, I mean, I don't have any sense. Is 1 million tons of soybeans, is that a lot for what China needs, or is that not so much? Any idea?
Well, I suspect it's a lot for Argentina. Now, I being a cattle guy, I'm not real familiar with all the numbers surrounding exports and China's demand. To me, it sounds like a lot of bushels of beans, Vance, and so certainly that's something that could be helping out bolster the price of soybeans here domestically.
Yeah, and it certainly puts China in the position where they have more leverage in the conversation. They can want to not buy soybeans, but if they want to keep producing pork and being able to provide the food staples for their own countrymen, they can't grow it themselves. If they can't get it from the U.S. and they can't get it from our allies, then that means they're probably going to come to the bargaining table a lot easier. So this does seem like it stings a little bit.
For years we didn't worry too much about Argentina in terms of production because their infrastructure, the roads to get their crop to market, their shipping, everything was just way behind the times. And here of late, they've really come on board, and they're a force to be reckoned with. And certainly, when China sees us as an adversary, they're going to source as much of their commodities from South America as they.
I was initially very excited about Javier Milei, the president of Argentina. I thought, hey, they're getting rid of their socialist, communist, overlords and all of this corruption. But it was very, very quick into his tenure that he was a part of one of these cryptocurrency, pump the price up way high and then sell it, and then basically mocked people by being like, well, if you're dumb enough to buy it, then that's your problem. And anybody that touches something and like cryptocurrency and deals with it without integrity, you should just assume that they will not deal with you with integrity on any other issue. And so I went from being a big fan of his libertarian chainsawing to not thinking very much of him, and it turns out this is probably the right perspective to have.
Yeah, I agree.
All right, let's move on to story number 3. This is one that probably hits a little close to home with you, Glenn. We have been talking about New World screwworm for months now. This is that small larvae that embeds its way into cattle. If once it hatches, it can fester and kill the cattle. It is a terrible situation. It's a problem that happened in the 70s and 80s, but we fought it back all the way to Colombia. But now it is back. And Glenn, you are a cattle rancher. What is going on? What's the latest with this? And where do you think we go from here?
Vance, I don't know. You know, my dad is 74, and he talked about this thing back in the 60s. Growing up, he said it was awful. If any cow or calf that had a cut on them, this thing would just burrow way down into the flesh. He said it was just extremely inhumane. And so, you know, the U.S. was able to eradicate that. And we pushed it, I guess, well into Central America, if not farther south. And they've kind of not been doing their job as far as keeping that thing at bay. And so it's 70 miles south of the line, last reported. And Vance, I think it's a matter of time. It's not if or but when we find that thing north of the border again. And I don't know what the damage will be to the beef market. Initially, I think there'll be a shock factor that certainly will come into play. We're enjoying some record high cattle prices right now, and so we certainly don't want that to go away. But our bigger concern is what this is going to do to the animal herd, and what particularly it's going to do to Texas cattle business. And I guess they're working. How they treat this is they radiate fly larvae and flies, and they release them out into the wild, and they breed with female screwworm flies, and they produce sterile eggs, and that eventually will cause it to go back south again. And man, Vance, it got me worried.
I mean, I think that everybody that's looked at it very close is worried. Apparently, the FDA just recently conditionally approved Decomax CA injectables from Zoetis. And I know that ivermectin is another way that they treat it. But I think that once it's in the United States, I was talking to some animal pharma guys, and they said it is not if, it is when, just like you. And that, this is going to really scare people when they are seeing the imagery of it. There was that woman that had contracted New World screwworm disease while she was traveling in Central America and came back to the United States and died. And it's not just that it will impact cattle, it can get into human beings, and it is a brutal way to go.
Yeah, absolutely. Again, we're enjoying some great cattle prices right now, and it's been a long time coming. And we're finally in the cattle business being able to build some equity. And so, again, we can't stand prosperity very long in any segment of agriculture. And it seems like I hope that this is short-lived. Time will tell. Maybe it's much ado about nothing, but in the short term, it's got folks concerned, and we just got to be on top of our game here to make. I think one way that cattlemen can kind of try to eradicate this, make sure we got a good pour-on program, that we put the products on the backs of cattle to keep flies from even landing on them to begin with. That's one way that we're going to kind of counteract.
Well, and another way to keep it out is to keep that border shut. I know they tried to do a thing, once this was starting to go, they opened it, then they shut it again, but let's just keep that thing shut. We can let American farmers sell American beef to Americans. And if that keeps the price up, then I'd rather have that than New World screwworm flying around the U.S.
Amen, sir. And I tell you, if they ever open the border back up, which will happen eventually, I think it'll be a wall of cattle that'll just come flooding across the border, and we'll see prices take a hit, I think. But in the meantime,
well, ranchers aren't going to want this. The only way they're going to get that pressure is if the packing houses do, or consumers start throwing a fit about prices. I mean, that's why we started importing eggs from Turkey and South Korea, is because people were so worried about that. But I think it's a great time for farmers to be getting the word out that one of the things, yes, cattle prices or beef prices are high, but a lot better than having New World screwworm here.
Yeah, and we haven't seen a whole lot of pushback from consumers on high beef prices. Now, Vance, I don't want beef prices. I don't want beef to be a luxury item. I don't want it to be like lobster or something, where folks just buy it or on a birthday or Christmas or something. But certainly beef prices are high. But in the meantime, these are the levels we as beef producers kind of need them to be to kind of make our payment and build some equity and have something to pass down to our kids.
Well, make hay while there's sunshine, as they say. All right, moving on to story number 4. Government shutdown disrupts USDA services, delaying farmer payment and aid. The U.S. government shutdown began at midnight on September 30th due to funding lapses from partisan disputes severely impacting the USDA during peak harvest. Over 42,000 employees, half the workforce, are furloughed, closing most farm service agency offices and halting new loans, payments, and data releases. Key disruptions include delayed $2 billion in halting new loan payments and emergency commodity assistance, disaster aid for weather-damaged crops, and conservation reserve program reimbursements, exacerbating cash flow crises for farmers facing a 25% income drop. Loan processing stops, stranding refinancing needs, while research, crop progress reports, and organic certifications all pause. Glenn, you are a good old American that is a patriot, but I suspect you don't love government spending. So where are you at on government shutdowns?
I don't mind them. Our government the bureaucracy is absolutely bloated and needs to be cut. But having said that, the timing for this from USDA and the farmers that are suffering right now, the timing could not be worse. I mean, a lot of row crop guys are at break even on, or below break even on what corn and soybean prices are, and FOS levels are what, $800 a ton. The input costs are just out of sight, and I don't think we've experienced a lot of drought this year throughout the U.S., but certainly there's pockets, and so some of that emergency relief, if it's delayed at all, it's just going to add and compound to the problem that already exists.
Today's stories were a lot about a lot of the crises that are happening to agriculture right now. And I remember a mentor of mine telling me, whenever you look back on history, there's usually like a very oversimplified version of what happened. It's this one thing that happened. But the truth is, if we look back on history and ag really does have a stutter step here and really have some challenges and maybe getting knocked down on its rear for a while, it's not going to be just because of tariffs. It's going to be tariffs, and our allies weren't on our team, and the government shutting down, and what farmers were expecting they couldn't do. It seems like there is a whole lot lined up against farmers right now.
Yeah, and what this does, Vance, is just exacerbates consolidation in farmland. Years and years ago, it took several families to take care of a farm. Now it takes several farms to take care of a family in terms of what the return is per acre. And so, you've got these private equity groups that are gobbling up this farmland and because they've got the capital to do it. And anytime that we see a really challenging economic situation approach, again, we see more consolidation of farmland. And that breaks my heart, because I like to see small farms be able to make it, and just anymore, just take more acres. That's a sad reality of it.
Well, it is a rough time out there. That is going to do it for our news stories today. Moving on to the Bitcoin land price report. This is where we make a comparison between the price of Bitcoin and land. And today, Bitcoin's price is up at $120,500 per Bitcoin, which is a pretty big walk up from the last couple of weeks, but still just a little bit below the all-time high of 124,000. So, Glenn, what county are you from? And tell me a little bit about the land out there.
Yeah, so I'm from Berry County, Missouri. So McDonald County would be the southwesternmost. We are one county east. So our county joins Arkansas. We're in the heart of the Ozarks here. Pretty rough country, rocky, hilly. And if you've been to Branson, that type of terrain, we're just west of Branson. So uh, not very conducive for corn and soybean production, but we are in the heart of cattle country. And so that's what we produce here on our farm.
Yeah, and if somebody were going to put up a little bit of rangeland pasture for sale, what would a good acre of that pasture go for?
Well, between 6,000 to 7,000 an acre probably now. Before COVID, it was 3 to 4, but unfortunately, like everything else, land costs have just skyrocketed. I'd say between 6,000 and 7,000.
Well, let's call it a cool 6,500. So that means at 120,500, that means one Bitcoin would buy you 18 and a half acres, or you could get 0.05. One Bitcoin would buy you 18.5 acres. So, Glenn, how does that sit with you? Do you think Bitcoin is worth 18 and a half acres out there?
Well, I'm not real versed in the Bitcoin world, being an old cowboy, but I do like my land. So if I had any Bitcoin, I would probably
Turn into land. What do you know about Bitcoin, Glenn? What's the amount that people in your world, in your tribe, how much do they know about it?
very, very little. Uh, I don't know very much myself, and so I know it's something that I need to be more versed on, and certainly it's the future events. And I appreciate what you do and trying to educate farmers and folks in agriculture about the importance of Bitcoin. And the dollar may be something we don't even deal with in the 20 years from now, but in the short term, I'm slow to adapt, I guess.
Though, Glenn, I mean, we've known each other now almost a year, and I would say you, like the other people on FCS Financial Board, you're open to learning. You just don't have somebody in your world that's sitting there talking about it. And it's hard to learn about a technology that nobody's around talking to you about. And so it can seem like something that's far away or maybe not that important. I get it.
Very true. Very true.
Well, I did. I gave a talk at the Flinchbow Forum for Agriculture, which was held in Manhattan, Kansas, and I stood up and told a group of 250 policymakers that I think the people engaging with Bitcoin today are going to be farm landowners tomorrow. And I don't know, maybe you could check out that talk and give me feedback on what you thought, but I just published that today.
Send me a link.
All right, moving on to the Peter Thiel paradox. This is where I'm going to ask Glenn, what is one thing that you believe that almost no one you know agrees with you on?
Well, I think I'm probably not alone in this, but my dad and a lot of his peers think that land values are going to plummet again someday. They lived through the 80s, and Dad bought this farm that I live on in 1983 and paid 16% interest rates. And folks that bought land back in the 70s, they saw land go down, prices go down by a third, and he said, "Boy, these days are coming. Those days will be here again." And I disagree with that. We see too much urban sprawl from the Springfield and Branson area. And I think this is universal, Vance. I don't think this is necessarily specific to my part of the world, but guys are buying 40 acres to hunt on, and folks are moving out of the cities, trying to avoid all the issues that go on in an urban area. And they can do their job from home with technology and the internet today. And so many folks are working from home. And so they're coming out into our part of the world, and we're seeing these farms just kind of being divided up into smaller tracts. And I disagree. I think land values they may plateau, but they will never recede in price. That's just my thoughts.
Yeah, I mean, I got to tell you, Glenn, I think you failed this one because I absolutely agree with you. I don't think land prices in dollar terms are ever going to go down because the government is going to continue to print money, and that money has got to find a home. And I think a lot of people say, hey, I'd rather have land than I would to put this money into my savings account, because if I leave it in my savings account, it's worth less. And at least land, I can raise cattle on or hunt or something. So I'm in total agreement with you. I don't think land prices are going down, at least in terms of dollars.
Yeah. We had opportunities to buy land years ago that thought was overvalued, but now looking back, it was extremely cheap. So it passed up opportunities.
I mean, that's the hardest part about any kind of investment, right? You have to believe something that people will only agree with you after the fact. You have to believe things that other people don't believe, and you're going to make any money. All right, so now moving on to the worthy adversary. Glenn, who is one person that you respect, but you strongly disagree with?
Well, you probably got this before, but I respect this guy, and I respect what he's trying to do. But that's Robert F. Kennedy right now. I respect what he's trying to do in terms of trying to make America healthy, eat healthier. We've got too much obesity and diabetes in our country. But when he's targeting farmers and some of the tools that we have in our toolbox, saying that they're not safe, that makes him an adversary. This morning, I was using some Roundup on some pasture. I'm going to put in some wheat, to graze cattle on this winter and cut for spring. But Roundup's safe, Vance. And I know in your former life, working at Monsanto, you were well versed in that. But Roundup and some of these chemicals that we use, they're tools in our toolbox that I think not only helps make our jobs more efficient, which we have to be, but they're safe. So implants that we use in our cattle. They make cattle the cost of gain cheaper. They feed conversion so much better. And the one implant that we use in a steer, for example, I think it has estrogen, but like a head of cabbage, head of lettuce has like 1,000 times more estrogen than what we're given a steer. That really. That steer much more, well, it's feed conversion and that sort of things, more efficient. That's what we need to do. We got to do more with less if we're going to feed a growing world. So I guess he would be my adversary. I respect what he's trying to do in terms of we've got to eat more healthy. We've got to do away with these ultra processed foods. But again, it's a choice. But I respect what he's trying to do, but when it comes to the tools that we have in our toolbox as farmers and ranchers, him going after those things, he's my adversary. 100%.
So just out of curiosity, Glenn, if you didn't have Roundup to use on your field, like what would your dad have been using?
We would have tilled our ground, which we've done in the past, and we would have tilled if we wanted to go from fescue to, let's say, crabgrass or alfalfa or something else that we could cut for hay. We would till. Well, we've been told that tillage, we've got to do away with tillage because of the runoff and soil erosion. Well, Roundup lets us use no-till technology. We rented a drill off the county and we've been planting wheat the last few days. So that's what we'd have to do is we'd have to till, plow deep, and disc. And so there'd just be runoff if we had a big rain event.
It's so easy when people talk about getting rid of something. They don't have to have an answer for what would be the opposite of that. And that's why I'm always saying, farmers, if you're getting something taken away, just show people what you did before, because they often perceive we're using Roundup because we're either too dumb, we don't know that this is this terrible chemical, or we don't care. But that's never true. You choose Roundup because it's superior than the other options, and people don't have any concept what the other options were.
Well, the only other option is and plow. And we've been taught, in elementary school that, you need to get rid of your plows because it just causes soil erosion. Bad for the environment. We the soil. And I get it and I agree. But Roundup is the tool that we have in our toolbox to eliminate tillage.
Well, I'm with you on that one. I think he is a worthy adversary, and I'm also in agreement. Like, something's got to be done on these other issues about American health, and I don't know what we're gonna do. Well, Glenn, I want to thank you so much for coming on the show. If people found your way of thinking interesting, I don't think you're a social media guy, but how would people reach out to you?
Well, I'm chairman of the MFA Oil Board of Directors, and I've got my email address there. But yeah, Vance, I love what I do, and we're very blessed. I tell my kids every day, be thankful we live where we do, and we have the occupation we do, because you don't have to look very far away. Folks in urban areas, they may think they got it good, but us out here in rural America, we have it great.
Well, Glenn, I am so glad to have become friends with you, and thank you so much for coming on the show.
Thank you, man.
All right, that's going to do it for the Ag Tribes Report this week. As I sign off, I wanted to talk a little bit about something. With legacy interviews, I get a chance to sit down with people reflecting on their lives and the things that happened to them and how they reacted to it. And one of the things that happened recently was I had a very deep conversation with a woman that had experienced a lot of tragedy. And one of the things that she said as we were leaving was, I'm so glad I got to talk about this. I'm so glad I got to really break down what happened and think about it in the context of my life years after those things. So while I would love to interview your loved ones, this is what we do here all the time. And if you're interested, you can go to legacyinterviews.com. But I would really encourage everyone out there to talk with your parents, to find the time, not just fitting it in between things, but to make an hour or two to go talk about another person's life, to hear about what it was that they went through, and watch how much it can change their life, their experience of those memories, to give them a chance to reflect on it. And so I really hope and encourage that you do that. And if we can help you out, go to legacyinterviews.com to find out more. I'm going to wrap up. We will be back next week, but I am so glad that you joined us this week. And as always, feel free to disagree. So the conference organizer has a terrible challenge. The audience can pull out their phone and pull up anyone talking about anything. How do you find somebody that is both going to reach every single person in that audience and yet still have that spike of energy where people are electrified because they're hearing about things that they aren't used to or that make them think about things in a different way? The most important question that I ask a conference organizer is, what is it that you want people to feel? What emotion do you want them to have when we leave this talk? What's their disposition? How are they going to interact with one another? What does this prompt in the people that are there? It's not just the information. What you're giving them is energy, a reason to be there in that moment. Now they take that energy and they share it amongst each other. For me, the best speech is when people walk away being like, I now have a tangible skill, but they didn't necessarily readily accept it and they had to grapple with it. They set their phone down, they leaned forward, they said, how do I feel about this? And through that, an energy is created that is not about the speaker, it's about the person listening to the speech. It's far beyond motivation. It's actually giving people skills.